Welcome to the Not Badger for the week ending August 20th, 2016. Here, thanks to our brainwashed thralls whom we have bewitched with tears of virgin Nico girls, we have compiled a collection of funny, interesting, and hopefully useful clips from our most watched shows. Enjoy the spoils of their hard work. In Polecat Cast 75, we look at the stories of the week, including Hillary Clinton's own refusal to listen and believe.
It's quite likely, in fact, that there was never a gender gap in cheating. There was just a gender gap in how it ggets judged and the impact that it has on the cheater's life and the victim's life.
Is this really even the kind of gap that we want to see even out? I mean,
Seriously?
Like, this is the point we're at where it's like, women cheat just as much as men do. Awesome. This is equality. No, yeah. This is not good.
No. Uh-oh. Equality would be if cheating on her husband could be used against her in court as a statement that she is a bad mother and an abusive partner, and a reason why he should get the bulk of the estate, the bulk of her income, and custody of the children. Because although those conditions don't generally apply to women in divorce cases, in contested divorce cases, they do get applied to men in contested divorce cases, even though the law says they're not supposed to. That would be equality. Equality would be if claiming abuse didn't get her out of the marriage, and claiming, or if claiming abuse did get him out of the marriage. This is not equality. And speaking of gaps, I think women's gap seems to be the problem.
Oh, I see what you did there, Hannah.
They're thinking with that instead of their brains. I would say it's actually kind of hard for Hillary to make a tactically wise choice at this point because she has spent, I think, about 40 years fucking this up. She started clear back, I believe it was in the 70s, when she defended a client accused of raping an underage girl. And she used questioning the girl's sanity as his defense. She basically portrayed the girl as a crazy person who made up these accusations and everything. And she did get the guy some sort of deal based on her defense of him. So, and then she bragged about it and laughed about it and everything. And while I'm not going to get into whether I think what she did at that time was right or wrong, it does set the tone for, Hillary not being able to turn around and say, listen and believe. But then she went through in the 90s when her husband was being accused of all kinds of things. And again, I'm not going to say he's guilty. I'm not going to say he's innocent. There's evidence both ways and a lot of that stuff. The only thing that was conclusively proved was that he did cheat. And it's kind of hard to deny that, considering there was physical evidence twice. Twice there was physical evidence. There were tapes with Jennifer Flowers, and then of course there was the messy dress with Monica Lewinsky. And then there were also tapes with Monica Lewinsky because of her taped conversations. But that all aside, I want to point out the way Hillary Clinton responded to this. She didn't just stand by her man, which is a choice. She can do that. She's a wife. She can choose to stand by her man. She can choose to walk away. She found it probably strategic to stand by her man, politically expedient, so to say. And maybe she loves him. I kind of doubt it, just from the stories. But in any case, she went on the attack. She used to refer to instances of women coming forward to talk about their relationships with Bill Clinton as bimbo eruptions. She said terrible things about the accusers who claimed sexual harassment and worse, to the point of saying that they were trash and nobody would believe them. She actually participated in a media attack. She called it a vast right-wing conspiracy, so she basically accused these women of lying for political reasons and being shills for the Republican Party. And she did every possible thing she could do to blame the accusers and the women who he was accused of having an affair with for attacking her husband, rather than dealing with the situation as it was. And if she were really the open-minded and, caring person that she claims to be, and she wanted to stay with her husband and, move forward from the situation and everything, she should have been honest. She should have simply said, this is the way things are. And she could have said there was an open relationship. She could have said that she didn't care if he cheated. She just wanted to be with him, whatever. But instead, she disparaged every woman besides herself who was associated with the president at the time. And now she wants to come forward and say women should be listened to and believed. Of course she's going to remove that from her site. Of course she's going to maybe delete the tweet. All of this is bullshit. She doesn't have a real opinion on this. She has whatever the way the wind blows. She'll stick her finger up in the air, and in whatever direction it's coming from, whatever direction it's going to, that's the direction she's going to go. And it came back to bite her in the ass this time because of her history. She thought people would forget. She thought it had been enough years. She thought people wouldn't speak up. She thought the accusers would be too embarrassed to come forward, particularly Juanita Broderick, because if I remember correctly, she changed her story at one point and later said that she was coerced into saying what she said the first time around. So, and she's not the only one who made an accusation. There was a second accusation. I can't remember the woman's name. And if I had my regular computer and my two screens up, I would be citing news stories and all kinds of stuff. But this information is available all over the internet. In fact, Mrs. Broderick's grandson, had stated to her, as according to one story, that he found the information online and learned about her situation without being told, and that he supported her because you're going to tell your grandmother you support her. So if he could find it, and I'm sure anybody else can as well. But yeah, Hillary Clinton, what she has demonstrated by doing this is yet again, she is nothing but a hypocrite. There is no substance whatsoever to her. She's just a facade, and we don't know what's really behind that facade.
And I bring up Lori Penny for an important point because the article talks about it as though it's like, oh, it's just this little tiny dark corner and sad part of Tumblr with their one little ball pit, and they just are a little loud, and that's about it. But Lori Penny is not a small figure. She gets to speak at a lot of places and gets paid very well to do it. And, in fact, insists on being paid very well. If you saw, there was this one time, this guy, who, there was this, they were talking about Britishness. It was a debate, and there was this older gentleman that was there making the counter-argument against Lori Penny. And she accused him of being a racist on the stage, and he lost his shit, and he basically, said that, let me tell you a little bit about Lori Penny. There was another event that I was supposed to speak at, and I offered to do it for free because I thought it was important to have the conversation. And Lori insisted on getting paid such a high sum from a group that didn't have any money because they were like a charity-driven organization. They didn't have a lot of money. But Lori Penny insisted that she get paid so much that they decided to cancel the event because they couldn't afford to pay her. And
I believe the sum was $20,000 or pounds.
It was like 20,000 pounds or something ridiculous. Yeah. And he basically said, this is the bitch that is supposedly caring about the little guy, that supposedly has the backs of the oppressed. And
she is the voice of the people, Brian.
Yeah, she is the voice of the people. And so imagine that. Lori Penny, from a group of people who couldn't afford to pay her, insisted on 20,000 pounds. So how much is she getting from the places she actually does get to go speak at? And she does get to speak at places often.
There's this one quote by this guy that died recently, I think it was Buddy Ryan, who said that those who listen to the fans are destined to be sitting with them next week. And the reason why that is because the fans do not understand how certain creative products will evolve organically. When you have an outside force like the fans trying to peer pressure the creator into doing something that will properly advance the socio-political agendas, that will create a better society for all of us, it's just not going to work. There's nothing that I hate more as somebody who is involved in the world of film than having other people say, oh, something should have been this way. Then you don't understand the medium of TV and film. because the whole purpose of it is that somebody comes up with an idea and then they turn the camera on the idea that they're trying to bring to life. They're not supposed to have so many cooks in the kitchen that it just becomes a gigantic mess where you're trying to please everybody, because then eventually you just don't please anybody. So when it comes to the Steven Universe thing, of course it's going to have this sort of toxic element to their community because of things like their decisions to make these characters asexual. And I'm not saying like that's them trying to appease them. It's just, you know, it's something that's going to eventually happen. It's like if you had an entire show where a whole bunch of people had different colored hair.
Honestly, to me, this is just another example of two things, actually. One, things that are bad when men do them, not being bad when women do them. And two, demonizing male sexuality. Because you think about it, we've got a double standard here that is not being talked about in the article, but it's very, very much present in the discussion on loyalty and adultery. You know, if a man cheats, he's a scumbag, right? If a man cheats, he's abusive. He's actually doing something to the woman. I've even seen it argued on Reddit by at least one feminist, actually 2 or 3 feminists were in that discussion, that it is a physical abuse that should be prosecutable or even considered rape by, you know, retroactive rape by dishonesty if a man cheats. That if a man cheats on his partner, she should be able to withdraw her consent for all of the times that they had sex because she thought he was loyal and she wasn't at risk for a sexually transmitted disease. So, and this didn't go both ways in the argument. And the reason that it didn't go both ways, according to this feminist argument, was that women don't do it as often as men. Where, you know, here clearly they do. The research is showing what we already knew, that women do cheat as often as men. But the double standard is very stark. They're celebrating this like, you know, women are catching up with something, like women are obtaining a freedom that men supposedly have. Well, they don't have it. And they've never had it. And they've always been treated as though they are some sort of a scumbag. You know, aside from politically arranged marriages where both partners have, as long as they were discreet, been able to have side action. In ordinary relationships with ordinary people, it has always been treated as some sort of an abuse when a man cheats. And it's just ridiculous that these women are treating this as something different. You know, and the other aspect of this is it's not the only thing. You know, here we have celebration of women smoking cigars. We see a celebration of women ducking out of work. We see celebration of everything that men get criticized for doing when women do it. You know, all of a sudden it becomes a good thing because a woman is doing it. Or all of a sudden the woman has developed a sense of freedom because she's doing it. If it's dysfunctional behavior, the fact that a woman is doing it does not make it not dysfunctional. It just means she's just as bad as everyone said men were for doing it.
When you look at this thing, there is a history of feminism treating men as disposable, or just history in general treating men as being disposable. But when you come into, you know, the current last, say, 10 years or so, this idea where they've taken the idea of men being disposable and turned it into white men being disposable, because now we have, you know, you can't talk about black people or black men being disposable. You can't talk about other minorities as being disposable like you can white men, because they are now a protected class. This whole idea, it's just kind of crazy to me that we've gotten to this point where people can write articles like this and there's not any pushback. I mean, well, okay, maybe I'm painting with broad strokes, but there doesn't seem to be the kind of pushback where people are saying, like, you know what, you can't publish this. This is fucking insane. It's like, how are you going to denigrate and other and, you know, belittle entire groups of people like this when, you know, if you were to take this and change it from white men to black men or black women or Mexican men or Mexican women or, you know, whatever it is, to, you know, pick your flavor, whatever sure, thing you want to inject into it. If you did that, there would be a fucking outcry like no other. People would lose their fucking minds without exception, without question. It's, you know, we have seen it time and time again. And
certainly wouldn't be on ABC.net.
Yeah. And here's the thing though. It's like, it's funny because like I forget what it was. There was a plugin where, like, you know, on a browser plugin where it would change. I forget what it was. It was like a Guardian thing where it would change everything to Jews. And it's like just to kind of illustrate how fucking insane it was when you took, like, this protected class, and you plug them into the article as the aggressor or whatever it was. But when you look at this is just nuts to me. This shows that there has been a growing systemic problem where people are whittling away at empathy towards other people to the point where they can be dismissive and derisive and denigrate and other and just make people into second-class citizens. I mean, this shouldn't happen to anybody, you know? And it's not just like, oh, I'm the white man talking about it because I'm angry because I'm a white man and they're talking about me. But this is ridiculous. This is the kind of thing that brings down our society little by little, because it erodes the health of our society. It erodes the health of our interactions. It makes it so that people see other people as less than human.
Because my life is made harder by everyone else out there, and I actually have no impact on it. This confidence of what you call the mediocre white male comes from the fact that men, in general, realize they are not going to get a handout. They are not going to get a leg up. They have to either make it or they're going to sink. Or sink or swim, make it or break it, whatever. Okay? And this is just what you have to do. So does that process of essentially struggling to gain the self-confidence and the skills and the assuredness to make it in the world, just surviving, that is a confidence and character-building experience. And a lot of men do get it. And what this person who wrote this article is saying is, well, I don't see why. They're just mediocre. I need that, but I don't know how to get that. So I'm going to pretend like I have that, even though I can't get it, because what they're getting comes from life experiences that I never had.
If they want to have that excellence, if they want to be equal to men, they're going to have to do that. They're going to have to be able to say, no, I don't have the confidence. I'm not sure that I'm going to achieve this. I'm not sure this is going to work. I'm actually scared that somebody's got to deal with this, and it's up to me.
Yep. Confidence isn't something you just switch on because you need it.
And it's not skin color related either.
Yeah, it's not related to your genitals or your skin color or any of that. It's something that you're going to have to build over time. Either you're going to learn it early from your folks or from your early life experiences, or you're going to learn it the hard way later on. But that's the only way it comes. There's no, like, I guess I'm going to pretend to be confident and that'll make me confident. That doesn't work. Which is exactly what the article says. Carry yourself like a confident person.
Yeah, or doing something like this article and actually making somebody the bad guy so that can elevate you.
In Rant Circle 66, we look at the horrible backlash against Philip Davies for his horrible, horrible sexism, misogynistophobia.
Today's topic is, of course, the backlash against Philip Davies and his horribly misogynistic statements at the International Conference on Men's Issues that we all know were horribly misogynistic. And incidentally, Karen was there. She was in the audience. So what you're saying is essentially his lecture or his speech was based entirely on observable facts that you can find.
Oh, yeah. No, just like his presentation before the Backbench Committee, I believe it was, he did an hour or an hour and a half of presenting the facts because I guess he had, and this was a couple of years ago, he had, someone had made a call for women to be sentenced more leniently, for their gender to be taken into consideration as a mitigating circumstance and things like that. And there was all this talk of women being more harshly treated by the criminal justice system. So he actually decided he was going to look into the statistics and into the data, and everything that he found pointed in the opposite direction. The only thing that he found where women were more likely to be punished in a certain way than men was with fines or probation. And the reason why they're more likely to get fines and probation is because that's a way for them to avoid a custodial sentence or a harsher sentence. So the men who aren't getting the fines and probation are not getting them not because they're being treated more lightly, but because they're being sentenced to custody.
Yeah, and another thing is that these are statistics coming out of the U.S. If people aren't familiar with the statistics from the U.S., women actually get more of a reduction in sentencing, not just sentences themselves, but whether or not they are sentenced to punishment.
Yeah, U.S. and UK, and probably I would guess every Western nation, they have a gender discount across the board from their first interaction with police. From the moment that they commit a crime, they're less likely to be stopped. When they're stopped, they're less likely to be arrested. When they're arrested, they're less likely to be charged. When they're charged, they're more likely to be charged with a lesser offense. When they're charged, they're less likely to be prosecuted. When they're prosecuted, they're less likely to be convicted. When they're prosecuted, they're more likely to have a lesser sentence included. They're less likely to be convicted, and if they are going to be convicted, they're often convicted on that lesser crime. And then when they are convicted, they're less likely to be sentenced to custody, and then their sentences are about 60% shorter than men's. And this is the US, the UK, across the board. In the UK, somebody crunched the numbers and found that if both men and women were treated the way women are treated in the criminal justice system, 5 out of 6 men who are currently in prison would not be there.
And that's probably the ratio of male to female prisoners would be equal.
Not quite equal, but I think it would be closer to 60-40 than it is to 95-5, right? Or 90-10.
What I was trying to get out there, and of course this is a general discussion, so I appreciate Karen bringing in more information, but the gender sentencing gap is greater than the gap between white people and black people. So there's more of a penalty for being a man in the gender system than there is for being black.
Oh, it's 6 times wider than
really?
The gap. Yeah, 6 times wider than the gap between blacks and whites. There was a paper that was done by a female researcher, and she found that consistently, in the U.S. at least, it was 6 times wider between men and women than it is between blacks and whites. They're calling for him to be suspended. That's different. A resignation would be him taking a bunch of heat and stepping down under pressure from his party. Demanding a suspension is demanding that the party actually take action, whether he's willing to voluntarily go or not.
Isn't it interesting how men's rights, according to feminists, are the most defended rights on the planet, and that's why we can't defend them at all?
Well, just while we're on the topic of quite fringe British politics parties, I think it bears saying out here the different approach that the BBC has taken to 2 of them in particular. The Justice for Men and Boys Party, as I've already said, they're a small party, they're basically inconsequential, they're probably not going to achieve anything, certainly not for years or years to come, if anything ever at all. BBC, the establishment, basically government propaganda organisation at this point, shits all over them. Women's Equality Party, another inconsequential party that are probably never going to achieve anything ever. Government propaganda machine that is the BBC holds them up and is like, yeah, this is a really cool party looking for equality, even though Justice for Men and Boys Party, I've looked through a lot of their sort of figures and whatnot, and they tend to actually come up with legitimate arguments and legitimate evidence for their positions, whereas the Women's Equality Party is always the wishy-washy, oh, we just want equality.
Aquatic
and
tree.
And that's kind of where it is. Yeah, they want an aquatic tree. It just interested me, the difference that the BBC takes, we get this thing, it's like, oh, the patriarchy and the status quo and everyone who's trying to keep the women's down are supporting the status quo and all of that sort of shit. It's like, hang on, the actual people in the positions of power that we've got at the moment are bigging up the Women's Equality Party while shit-talking parties like Justice for Men and Boys and their associates when they're in kind of the same position. How is the establishment doing this thing to systematically keep the women folk down?
When I go on into hostile territory, so David Pacman or the Young Turks or, any kind of the Mother Jones and the Maclean's magazines and the New Republics and all of these, and I give interviews, CBC, stuff like that, I get asked to defend my positions. I will state something, they will ask me a question, I will say what I think, and they will say, well, how can you say that? And even when I go into friendly places, I just did an interview for a radio show in New Zealand. It's like a 2-part, it'll be aired in 2 parts because it's an hour long, and we can post the link to the first part in the thing if you want. But essentially, even the guy, these are friendlies. One of them was Danny Duchamp, who makes videos on YouTube from his shitty Honda Fit, taking apart feminist stuff. But even they were asking me difficult questions. They were playing devil's advocate a lot. And you never see anybody playing devil's advocate to feminists.
That speech.
Generally, there seems to be a deafening silence on all the benefits women have compared to men. In this day and age, the feminist zealots really do want women to have their cake and eat it. They fight for their version of equality on all the things that suit women, but are very quick to point out that women need special protections and treatment on other things.
Last comment has prompted women to put pictures of themselves up on social media eating cake
Feminists,
with the
not
hashtag
women.
But they're the same thing. But my ideology and sex are the same.
Them eat cake. We can speak now to Philip Davis. Do you stand by your comments?
Yes, I was just making the point about the justice gender gap, which is the figures are perfectly clear. They're facts. They're not opinions. They're facts. So, for example, 61% of men who are convicted of robbery are sent to prison. Only 37% of women who are convicted of robbery are sent to prison. 33% of men who are sentenced for child cruelty are sent to prison. Only 15% of women are sent to prison. For every single category of offence,
She sat there struggling to think of an argument.
sent to prison than a woman.
What do I say?
Spend longer in prison than a woman, and these are facts. These are from the official figures from the Ministry of Justice. They're not opinions. And
I just want to say, what kind of world do we live in where a person presents facts, things that cannot be refuted, and they're not based on emotions? They are simply what is. And they still have to sit there and say, look, I'm not giving you my opinion as much as you really want to believe I'm giving you my opinion. I'm telling you what is happening. The sky is blue. And then someone is saying, no, that's just what it is to you. You know, I see it differently.
I believe the argument she's about to come out with. Yes, these may be facts, but it's just the way you presented those facts.
Yeah.
We're just surrounded in these horrible derogatory words, and then she gives two examples of derogatory words.
Oh, well, I want to hear that. Okay.
It's not what you said, it's the way you said it, and you should understand my feelings!
It's two of the words you happened to use while describing these facts. Ah!
You know, I believe in equality, and for me to say that I think that the court should be gender blind, and if you believe in equality, a man should be treated exactly the same in the court as a woman. I don't really see why that's controversial. That's equality.
Well, you talked
Oh, here she is.
you talked about versions of equality, and
Yes.
you've just said that you believe in equality. Surely there's no such thing as a version of equality. There is just equality.
Oh, she's
How
just
many
being so
versions?
fucking obtuse. She's being
How
so
many
fucking...
versions of equality does feminism have? There's a
Yeah,
fucking
no.
1,000 versions of feminism, and apparently they're all to do with equality.
Yeah,
Fuck
well,
yourself, you stupid cunt.
No, it's like when he's talking about versions of equality, he's talking about the difference between actual equality and people who say they're advocating for equality while advocating for special treatment. That's the feminist version of equality. The radical, militant feminist version of equality is special pleading for women. You know, equality on all of the measures that are positive, and nothing less than equality on those in the boardroom, in politics, you know, among the wealthy in terms of wages earned and stuff like that. But no equality in any of the negative outcomes, no equality in terms of deaths on the job, no equality in terms of how long a sentence you serve for committing a crime, no equality there. Because, you know, that equality, that version of equality of the negatives, that's not what feminists are after. So she's literally saying that by him using this term, versions of equality, he's advocating for some kind of version of equality that is an actual equality, when in reality, his use of that term is accusing feminists of doing that.
Exactly, that's my whole point. And so my whole point is this, is that women can't say, these sort of feminists can't say on one hand that we believe in equality, but actually, when it comes to being sentenced to prison, actually we want to be treated differently to men, because that's in effect what they're saying at the moment. They want to be treated differently before the courts when it suits them, but they want to have equality on everything else. And my point is, if you believe in equality, and I believe in equality, and I'm making the case for equality, then you've got to follow that logic through, and you've got to say, well, I believe women should be treated by the courts in exactly the same way as men. That's true equality.
But the way in which you framed the facts that you've presented, using really quite derogatory language, you describe feminism as very derogatory. You talk about militant feminists and zealots. Do you not see feminism as a
That's
good
the best
thing?
you could come up with.
Okay, all right.
Militant and zealot.
I don't like your facts, but you used words that offend me, so your facts are invalid.
When you say just feminists and you don't use those derogatory terms, all you get is not all feminists. Not all feminists are like that. You're just lumping us all in with the militants and the radicals. So when you actually make the differentiation, you make the distinction, and you are calling out the militants and the zealots and the radicals, you actually do what they want you to do, which is to make the distinction. Then they say, oh, but you're using all of these derogatory terms like militant and zealot. Like, you know what? Fuck off, you stupid bint.
This is also another one of those cases of the actual data and what's being discussed and the principles of equality are not as important as feminism not being thrown under the bus. Well, hold on. We got to defend the label. Wait. You're attacking feminism on behalf of some principles. But the principles is like, we can talk about that. But first, we got to validate this feminist label. We got to make sure that it's still clean and untarnished by any of the fringe, tiny amounts of individuals that dare to use its name in a sinful and destructive way. Those people don't represent us.
No, what I see is hypocrisy is a bad thing. I believe in equality, and if people want to make the case for equality, as I'm doing, that's great.
But that wasn't my question. Do you think feminism is a bad thing?
Yes.
No, feminism's fine if it believes in true equality. That's fine. But what I'm against are these militant feminists, and we've seen today. All of this social media hysteria. I'm arguing for equality. I'm asking for men and women to be treated the same. Is anyone actually engaging in that argument? No. They're hurling abuse. They don't want the debate to be had. They're trying to quieten the debate because they don't really believe in equality. What they believe in is for women to have equality when it suits them, and they believe in women not having equality when it doesn't suit them. And so you can't have it both ways. You either believe in equality in everything, or you don't believe in equality. And I was making the case for equality, and that means, I'm afraid, that women should be treated by the courts in exactly the same way as men. That is what true equality means. You can't pick and choose which bits of equality you want.
Philip Davis, MP for Shipley, thank you for joining us.
There you go. It's like feminists want this buffet. They want a buffet, and they're like, oh, the 3-bean salad? No. This, the kale? No. But I'll have the deep-fried shrimp, and I'll have the, this, that, and the other, right? I'll have all of the good things, and I can just leave those other things that I don't like. But, is Brussels sprouts? Fuck, who wants them?
Now for Honey Badger Radio number 67, we look at how the label of feminism is more important than the fight for human rights itself.
Without its own belief or action, feminism is a nonsense term. It's meaningless gobbledygook, which opens up another question. Why are feminists obsessed with everyone calling themselves feminist if feminism as an idea is hollow and useless? Is it just a placeholder just so you can force people to demonstrate subservience? I'm going to make you call yourself a feminist because otherwise you're going to get beaten up? Is that doing feminism? Forcing people on their metaphorical faces in the face of your moral self-righteousness? Of course, we all know, including any feminists listening, that feminism is simultaneously meaningless and the most meaningful thing in existence. Meaningless in that there are apparently as many feminisms as there are women in the world, and meaningful in that it's the only good thing, the only right and true thing in the world. And in understanding what feminism means, I use something I call an existential clause. What that is an answer to a simple question. Would this phenomena, this event, this law, this advertising campaign, this curriculum, would this exist without feminism? And if it wouldn't, I consider feminism to blame for its existence. Would a presumption of mother custody exist without feminism? No. Therefore, this inequality is feminist. Would the asymmetrical expectation that men serve the state but women don't while having the same citizenship rights exist without feminism? No. Therefore, this inequality is feminist. Would primary aggressor laws exist without feminism? No. Therefore, bigotry against male domestic violence victims is feminist. Judging from the patterns that form by the answer to would this exist without feminism, feminism isn't about ending inequality, but is a belief about equality that justifies removing men's rights. So what is feminism? It's not a desire to end inequality. It's the belief that men are always more equal than women. In Animal Farm, an allegory about class oppression in both capitalist and communist societies, at the end the pigs, who dominated over the other animals, wrote, "All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others." If George Orwell wrote Animal Farm today, he'd have to update it after having observed modern feminist behavior. You see, the feminist pigs wouldn't say all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. They would say all animals are equal, but pigs are always treated worst of all. So we come again to why feminists insist that everyone bear their label. Is it some sort of missionary zeal? Or is it because when you agree that you're a feminist, you agree to the unwritten rule that all humans are equal, but women are always treated worst of all? And if anyone disagrees, somehow it doesn't work anymore.
In a way, what the SPLC did was use an ad hominem attack to delegitimize men's issues discussion. To delegitimize advocating for equal representation and equal treatment, equal consideration for human rights and law and policy. It's like, apparently, if they can consider discussion that takes place on those topics misogynistic, then it's not legitimate to say that there should be equal consideration for human rights, regardless of sex or race or whatever. It's not legitimate to say that because, some of the people saying it have questionable opinions. So therefore, it's all right to say, men can't be raped. It's all right to say fathers are deadbeats and abusers. It's all right to keep them from their families and put draconian child support obligations on them and make them homeless because, some guys say things that are a little misogynistic, right? Or at least they can be labeled that way. That's a perfect excuse for advocating cutting the genitals of infant boys. But, hey, it gets treated that way. In a theocracy where the leadership is exploiting the people, they need everyone to be part of their religion. Because you can't question feminism and still continue to financially support it. They can't make their money if they're in the minority. They can't make their money if people are allowed to say, now, wait a minute, you just asked me to financially support an organization that is actually helping to put innocent men in jail. Why should I financially support that? Kind of like what my friend went through, where the local domestic violence victims, I'm tired of not naming, Artemis House of Dayton, Ohio, helped to torture a guy for 7 years. I'm tired of not naming them. I don't think they can false report me to Child Protective Services now. My son's about to be an adult. They need people to be feminist because feminists won't question when they do that. They need people to be feminist because feminists won't question the idea that when a woman goes into court and lies, perjures herself when she files a false charge, that she shouldn't be prosecuted for that, the same as a guy who's engaging in tax evasion or who is lying about having not broken into somebody's house, or who's lying to get out of having his affair detected. Those guys would get jail time, those guys would get fines. But as soon as your lie is about being raped or about being beaten by your husband, you can get away with it. And feminists will not question that. Feminists will not question exempting women from legal standards that men face. Feminists will not question not caring as much about genital cutting of infant genitals if the infant in question is a boy. That's why they need people to be feminists. Because they can't make their money and they can't have their political influence if they can be questioned.
Feminism is a state-funded service to bring about gender equality. We could look at it like roads. They're supposed to fix the roads, or they're supposed to provide adequate medicine for those of us who are Canadian. They're a state-funded service to create equality between genders. But they also get to define what equality looks like. It's like having road crews or state-funded the transport agency in the government not only being tasked with fixing the roads, but defining what a fixed road looks like. I mean, how soon before corruption seeps in and they start saying, no, a fixed road has potholes. Mm-hmm. A fixed road is eroding away to the point where the tarmac, there's huge crevices, and you have a constant risk of bending your axle or busting a tire on your road. That's a fixed road.
Well, and then get two groups of people.
How have we gotten to the point where we've allowed a government-funded institution designed to bring about a particular end? How have we come to the point where we've allowed them to not only be cast and granted the authority to bring about that particular end, but define what that end is? It's insane.
Yeah, and then we've also got two groups of people. We've got the group that's defining roads as including potholes and big cracks and crevices and so on. And then we've got the group going, well, those aren't real highway repairmen. We're the real highway repairmen. We talk about how the roads should be better. So we're the ones that you should be paying attention. You shouldn't blame highway repairmen for how bad the highways are. Because
true asphalters.
Just because they're the ones that are actually affecting the highways doesn't mean that they have, any responsibility for the highways. It doesn't mean that they define what highway repair is. We who talk about it in coffee shops and college courses, we are the ones who define what highway repair is. And that's the feminist argument for stop saying feminism is responsible for things that are done by feminists. And then they have the gall to say, but you wouldn't be able to vote if it wasn't for feminism, because feminists made that happen. So they'll blame Congress and they'll blame the president, they'll blame everybody but feminism for things that feminists lobbied for until it's something that they want to take credit for, that they consider good. And then all of a sudden, it's feminist lobbying that made it happen, not all of the people who are engaged in the actual mechanics of doing it.
We spoke at length a few weeks ago about humanity's need for an enemy. But what we didn't speak of was humanity's need for a higher power. These needs might not be comparable in any sort of pattern, but they're both worth considering. One difference is the other is usually made flesh, and the higher power is usually something abstract. In fact, it's usually something supernatural. Usually. Or is it? We now know there is a secular concept that acts as a perfect placeholder, a perfect neuroreceptor for the concept of a supernatural higher power, and it's equality. It's that thing you can say you're in favor of without any obligation to describe it. I love Jesus, God is great, I'm in favor of equality. As a lifelong atheist, it pains me to admit that the most insipid of these statements, at this point in history at the very least, is I'm in favor of equality. It's because, practically speaking, accumulatively speaking, when you say that, you will very seldom be met with the challenge, what do you mean by equality? Particularly if it's a feminist who's saying it. And why? Because that conversation ends up going down one of the roads. The wage gap, patriarchy. All roads lead to a black hole of logic where equality means make things better for women because of upside down, land rah rah, I'm not listening, and you're a misogynist if you disagree. Just like Allah in practice actually means make things better for Muslims.
I've been told, no, you're completely wrong, you don't understand feminism. And actually, to prep for this talk, I read some online articles from the other point of view. And the one that, oh my gosh, I couldn't even get mad, it was so funny. But it was, what do you do if your boyfriend's not feminist? It was hysterical. And it just went through how to change him. And it says right there, don't worry, ladies, you can change him. And I'm just rubbing my head going, oh no, this will not end well. And there is that presumption that if you are not a feminist, you are just uneducated. And all of the tropes that I've observed in why people are accused of not liking feminism, they're all in this one article. It was fabulous. They're uneducated and they just don't understand, and it's your job to teach them. You have to point it all out. And then you've got he's just an asshole, ditch him. And then there's well, maybe he's in the middle, give it some time, but don't be afraid to be on your own. And so I was so ramped up for this. Yeah, I actually did my homework like a good girl. That's for my last point. Hannah, I absolutely agree with your assessment. Feminism has become and I don't think most people are aware of this on a conscious level, but it has become a get-out-of-jail-free card for women doing shitty things. Because if you can point to this supernatural, it's the patriarchy's fault, I'm not bad, I was drawn this way, and that's one of my favorites, of course, being a bunny, but then you have a pass, and it's like it's becoming baked in and grandfathered into the fabric of how our culture is working right now. Like original sin, like when women do bad things, well, they didn't have a good father figure, or, well, she was abused, or, well, men are just assholes. And there's all this excuse making, and this is translating, when you flip it over like a pancake, this is translating to, because women are, and again, this is fait accompli, it's just accepted, women are oppressed. You flip over the pancake, and all of a sudden women get extra stuff. So the reason feminism is being pushed so hard, it's working.
I'm reminded of when we had a slut walk here in Chicago. And NC Clark, who you guys might have known as Sour Grape, she lives close by, so she came to visit me after she went to the slut walk to record it, and she made a thing about it on her channel. And she spoke to a lot of the feminists at the slut walk, and a lot of these are younger people, so... And there was something about belonging to this idea that's bigger than yourself that was so attractive to them that... That's actually a lot of where this, for the people who are not politically and financially invested in it, like the ones that Hannah pointed out, but for like common people, mostly women, but some men too, a lot of male feminists, I think that there is a need to belong to something that feels greater than yourself, and the feminist label, which doesn't actually require action. You can just say you are one, and then that includes a bunch of stuff that you automatically believe that everyone has to agree with because, as Allison was pointing out, it gives you the moral high ground. It feels nice. There's a lot of great platitudes that you can speak to. If you don't dig too deep and you don't look at the history too closely and you don't actually like research facts, you get to say, you know, women's equality, obviously necessary, obviously it's a good idea. Anybody who opposes it can't be a good person. They can't know what they're talking about. And part of where I get this from is, you know, my peers that are involved in it, everything I see on television that discusses it, everyone in media, you know, etc. That are sort of repeating it, and my gender studies professors and stuff like that.
There's even a group called Women Against Feminism.
Oh my God, how could they do that?
But what are these women really saying when they declare they aren't feminists? What they think they're saying is, I don't hate men.
Please tell me. Please tell me what
men.
I'm saying.
I don't
please
think
tell
women
me.
are better than men. I'm not that kind of woman. You know, the crazy, bra-burning, feminazi kind. I'm a cool woman. I don't want to put women above men. For anyone who needs a refresher, this is what feminism means at its core.
Feminist, a person who believes in the social, political, and economic equality of the sexes.
Hating men and being a feminist are actually not connected at all. Not.
Dictionary definition, take a shot.
I don't know why they think they can still... They start with, I know what you're thinking. Yeah. I'm a psychic because I say so, and here's what I think you're thinking, and then what you're definitely thinking, but here is what this word actually means. It's one nonsense argument to another, and they think it fucking works.
And it often leads to hilarious discussions. I posted a long comment under a post of this video on Facebook, and after the video went through and said feminism is not about hating men, feminists showed up to respond to my comment by demonstrating their hatred for men, showing they were invested in treating violence as a strictly male behavior and considering it justified if, say, male victims of domestic violence and sexual violence are discriminated against. So they can't even hold on to it long enough to like, they can't maintain the illusion through even a single comment thread.
Yep.
Like, they can say it, they just can't live up to it. Girls are told what to expect from other people, what other people should do for them. And Lacey Green is treating that as an imposition on girls. And by the way, boys who have a lot of sex are not just talked about as studs. They're talked about as players. They're talked about as cads. They're talked about as risks.
Dogs.
They're talked about as potential rapists. If a boy has a lot of sex, he's engaging in rape culture. You know, this is not something that is positive on the boys' side and negative on the girls' side. Both sexes get told stupid things about themselves if they have a lot of sex. Neither one gets told the truth at school.
Okay.
Neither one gets told, you know, that it's dangerous for them, that they're putting themselves at risk, and that they should be more careful.
If all rape victims were men, rape victims would be treated better. She says this in this fucking video, and people just swallow this whole two completely contradictory concepts in one, and they just swallow it. What is the mechanism? How do people unhinge their jaws and swallow a gigantic mega Godzilla cow poop like this?
I can tell you that.
Yeah, I was.
This is the fast-talking, hard-sell sales pitch tactic. If you throw enough at the individual, fast enough, with enough triggering type words or at least emotionally loaded phrases, if you do that, you will always get them to swallow things. You know, except for the most savvy of people, you always get them to swallow things that are bullshit. You can feed people huge loads of bullshit by doing that. And she's made a career out of it.
He says, at best, egalitarianism is still feminism. So, checkmate. You're still a feminist, even though you tried to avoid it. But at worst...
is a diversion, responding to fears that by giving women more power, that means men will have less, which is not the case. The only way that we reach equality for men and women is by elevating the status of all women, women of all races, sexual orientations, and genders. Egalitarianism is a men's rights project. Feminism is a human project.
Egalitarianism is a men's rights project. Feminism is a women's project. And he has established earlier that true equality means elevating women. Therefore, you need feminism. This whole thing has nothing to do, because he has not at one point does he or Lacey or the first video, which I already forgot, the HuffPo one, say, you know, identify issues and ways to solve these problems. But rather, all of them just say, can we please stop like trying to criticize feminism, because I need it. I need it, guys. I need this thing to continue to exist. Even if it just has to. And so one of the ways I'm going to do it is I'm going to frame it so that if you don't agree with this thing, there must be something wrong with you. You are a bad person. You are not, you're morally inferior. You know, you don't have, you're stupid, or you mean well, but you're actually still doing what I think you should be doing, i.e. you're still a feminist, even though you don't know it.
Okay, can I just say something?
Yeah.
Feminists don't have an exit strategy. At some point, you're going to elevate women above men. Even if you allow that they are still below men, at some point, if you focus constantly on elevating women above men, you are going to end up elevating women above men. At what point, how does feminism recognize when that point happens?
It doesn't, because that's already happened. Women have been elevated above men. When women make a claim in court regarding certain criminal accusations, men's right to due process, men's right to be considered innocent until proven guilty, men's right to present evidence against their accuser's accusation in court, men's right to even face their accuser in a court of law it's impinged. It's reduced, and it has been reduced specifically for the purpose of making it less of an ordeal for a woman to make those accusations and go through the court process, whether the guy is guilty or innocent. So it's already been done. Women are above men. It's already been done in a number of ways. feminists are fighting for equal pay even when work is not equal. And they're coming out and admitting it, even though they're not saying they're admitting it, by talking about unequal work as if because feminists are doing things that, or women are doing things that feminists value, that makes it equal to things that men are doing that are actually valuable to the employer. And therefore women are owed money from their employer for things they do at home, as if that benefits the employer. Like they don't understand what a paycheck is payment for. Women are above men. Women are above men so far that women and men in the United States get mouth-foamingly outraged over genital mutilation of women in third world countries, in small portions of the world, small populations, very tiny number of women that this is happening to in comparison to the number of men, the number of boys whose genitals are being mutilated at birth all over the world. And it is more outrageous to pretty much society in general, the idea that even a pinprick should be done to a girl's genitals, even voluntarily, than it is that boys' foreskins are cut off to the point where they're suffering terrible damage. In some cases, to the point where the skin of the scrotum is pulled up over the penis in the healing process.
Ah.
Yes, I know, and it's horrible, and it's also not uncommon. And it's a terrible mutilation. It's a terrible thing to do to a child, and yet it's routine. And we have very little public outrage over this, and we've even had a judge order a parent to sign consent for this to be done to her child over her objections that it is hurting and harming the child, because the judge decided that it would be better for the child's health. Never in the United States would that have happened if the child was a girl. Women are above men. We're above men in so many ways, and we're completely unaware of it as a gender.
Lots of people felt these jokes illustrate the rampant sexism of the tech industry, while others thought that it was just ladies trying to suppress the rights of men to their frozen peaches.
Oh,
I'm just pausing for the banana. We don't really need to...
No, but here's...
Go ahead.
When you give women the right to silence men, you are taking away men's right to free speech, asshole! By definition!
This is actually really... This is a bigger deal than people think. Okay, we have a government-funded media entity mocking the concept of free speech, with the idea of influencing the public to believe that free speech is not important. Do you understand the gravity of that?
Yes.
Certainly not when men are doing it.
Well, the women are going to go
the wedge. This is something that I have said before. You have a totalitarian ideology. You have, oh God, how did I refer to it before? Authoritarian social micromanagement, I believe, is what I explained before. But this is an authoritarian, a totalitarian ideology, attitude. The easiest and most effective way to separate people from their attachment to their civil rights is to start by using female victim status to attack those civil rights only when men are the one whose rights are being infringed on, and they're infringing on them on behalf of women. You do that step by step, a little at a time, and over time, eventually, people will start accepting, well, free speech isn't all that important. Well, the right to due process isn't all that important. Well, I don't really have to have the right to vote. It takes its time. Well, it's okay if you don't allow somebody to present all of the evidence that might prove their innocence in a court of law, because we don't want to make women feel bad for accusing people of rape. And while we're at it, treason is such a terrible crime that if the state wants to say that you've committed treason because you have criticized something that the state did, we don't want to, make it difficult for the state to prove their case, because that's important to stop people from committing treason, right? So you don't get to present all your evidence either. And I mean, we have a precedent in rape cases, so it's really not that big of a step, is it? And that's what's going on here. It may or may not be deliberate, but feminism is the wedge to cut in between the general public and their attachment to their civil rights.
Yep.
We've been watching it cut and cut and cut for 100 years. Due to the tendency to want to perceive oneself as right rather than to actually be right. It's more important to feel right than it is to be right. And it's a loyalty you see in politics all the time. You see it in left-right politics. You see it in sexual politics. You see it everywhere. You see it with religion and anti-religion too. It's treating an ideology the same way that one treats one's favorite university's athletic clubs. They're not feminists. They're supporters of Team Feminist. And many of them have no real grasp on the mechanics or method of the game that they're supporting. And that's why they end up in this mentality, and they end up acting like he acted at that moment, because she was challenging Team Feminist, and that was taking away a part of who he is. He's made it his identity, and he has to feel right, even if she has evidence that he's wrong.
Finally, we have a fireside chat with YouTuber Shoe on Head. You lads, no further introduction needed. So I remember your first video that everyone watched. I mean, I think you had videos before, but your first feminist video, or you're making fun of it, where everybody knows the line, this video game character is dressed too sexily, I don't like it, change it. That's the one, right? And in specifically after you were done with your hilarious rant about that, you said, "Look, guys, I don't want to make feminist videos." All the time.
Okay, so
this is like a one-off, and then I'm not going to do any more. I just thought this was funny, and I wanted to make a joke about it.
Years before I came back to YouTube, I just made stupid vlogs of my life, and it was boring. And then one day I was just like, this is kind of stupid. I hit 1,000 subscribers, I think, and I got really nervous, and I was like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. So I just unlisted all of my old videos. And then 2 years later, after being on Facebook and just regressing back to internet normalness of just using Facebook to talk to friends and internet friends and stuff, I started noticing this trend of feminism popping up and social justice, and everyone was on board, and I felt like I was, for lack of a better reference, taking crazy pills. And everyone was so pro all this stuff, and I'm like, wait, this is blatantly racist. Why are you being racist to white people? Why are you saying that women can't rape? Just all this really stupid stuff. And so that all built up, and I was like, fuck it, I'm going back on YouTube to rant on this. But originally that Oppression Olympics was supposed to be a Facebook video. But then I was like, you know what, I'm just going to move it to YouTube. And I did. And then Sargon and Thunderfoot found it. And from there I found Sargon and Thunderfoot and people like that. I was like, oh my god, other people feel the same way I do. This is crazy. And the more I looked into this topic, the more it became not just, wow, this stuff is annoying, but wow, this stuff is destroying society.
The thing is that with feminism, because it has that foundational idea that everything needs to be judged by how it affects women, and you can see that in everything that they do. Everything. There's not a single thing that feminism doesn't do that is informed by this idea that we judge society by how it affects women. But with men's rights activists, and we got into this yesterday when we were talking about feminist labeling versus men's rights activist labeling. It's we advocate for men's rights, but we're not advocating for a society in which the morality of that society is judged by how it treats men. One of the things is that even though we advocate for men's rights issues and we have a rough idea of what we want to see in terms of equality, I personally as a men's rights advocate would invite people questioning what we're doing, making sure that we're actually advocating for a sane idea of equality. I would never want to see men's rights activism become both a vehicle to advocate for equality for men and saying that we understand or we define what equality is, because I see that's what feminism really has become. They say they are for women's rights, but they also say that they know what equality is.
Well, they their narrative changes depending on the subject. Whatever makes them look better is what they go with. They're either, oh, no, we fight for women's rights, you guys. Or it's, hey, no, we care about men too. Like, we fight for men's rights too. If you can't call yourself an egalitarian, just call yourself a feminist. It always changes.
You know, there was this girl at Charles Jr. who was behind the counter. It was last weekend. She looked at me and she said, nice eyes. I'm like, oh my god, I think she was going to rape me. Like, just jump over the...
You do have really nice eyes, though.
Oh my fucking god, it's happening again!
Triggered.
Why does everyone want to rape me?
I watched your video, your new video, in like super duper HD, and I'm just staring at your eyes, like, his inhumanly eyes. They're so cool. They're like ice blue. Anyway, I'll stop hitting on you and raping you.
Wow.
But...
Okay. It's not rape when a woman does it, Shu. You're fine.
I just have to ask, Snow, why are you in Canada?
Skeptic lives in Canada.
Oh! So it's sort of like the reverse Canadian girlfriend situation.
Yeah. I have a boyfriend. He lives in Canada. You wouldn't know him.
Do they not realize that it was just literally decades ago that women couldn't vote?
Decades.
Apparently not.
Literally just...
You know what really bugs me is people's overuse of the word literally. To not actually be a literal thing.
Maybe 100 or so years ago.
Literally
a
just
few years ago.
decades.
That
decades.
Women were still viewed as chattel.
Chattel.
The property of men.
No. You know what? I'm not even
never a thing. That was never a thing, was it?
No,
well,
it was
maybe
never
in like
a
ancient Rome.
Oh my god.
Well, let me think. No.
No, it has
never in America.
Allison,
Well,
it was,
aside from actually slavery.
Yeah.
It was just
But men were
decades
also-
ago. It was just decades ago, Allison. Like
But it
100
was
or so
never-
years ago.
It was never a situation of chattel property. No, there was no like woman trade. I mean, even in Rome, it wasn't that they were the property of their husbands, and that's like 2,000 years ago. It was that their husbands had life or death over them, which was actually sort of horrifying in a way, because there was just a more history moment. There was the cult called the Cult of Cybele, and at some point the Cult of Cybele pissed off the authorities in Rome, and it was mostly a cult. Most of the followers were women and eunuchs, and I think it was actually the ball cutting that pissed off the authorities in Rome. But what happened was the Roman authorities told the husbands of the women who were in the Cult of Cybele that they had to kill them. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like a benefit. It wasn't suffragette. It was the general. It was more like the general labor movement and the general suffrage movement that got women the right to vote. The suffragettes were just assholes and domestic terrorists and also
didn't they blow
racist.
things up and stuff?
Yeah, they did. And if they had been men, they would have been executed for treason, particularly since they blew things up during a war. Well, during a time when the nation was at war. Anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know it's because of the culture that they grew up in. Karen, give me a thank you. Look, everything's going great, but you're not being reasonable. You're being ridiculous. Give me a thank you. Give me a thank you for feminists for getting your right to vote. Otherwise, stop voting and go make me a ham sandwich.
What?
Yeah, you telling you.
I'm surprised I've never seen this.
Oh, there's.
Oh my god, that was so funny that like I think I lost the ability to laugh.
And
like,
you should watch the whole thing. But let me go to the last bit where Cenk goes.
Thank Cenk for feminism.
Yes.
Personally thank him.
Praise Cenk.
But I'm in the process of creating something called Honey Badger House, which is what I'm hoping will become a charity foundation for funding initiatives into the gender gaps for men's social services. And I would like to thank you because I think that your stream and what you did for Alien Jack sort of pushed me to finally get off my ass about that.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Well, also my husband suggesting that I don't actually have to run the services myself. We could create a charity foundation instead.
Oh, by the way, one of the best moments in our live stream was when you were really serious about talking about like domestic abuse and stuff, and then your husband came over and was like behind you, and you went to introduce him, but you accidentally smacked him in the face. I thought that was very ironic and beautiful for the stream.
We hope you enjoyed this clip show. If there was a clip from these shows you think we should have shown, please leave a comment on the video and include a timestamp. Thank you, and Badger on.